grab your pre-workout and turn up that volume. It is time for a new episode of the Powerlifter's Den with your host, Cam Smith. What's up, Powerlifter's Den family? Want to rep the podcast and look good while doing it? Check out my official merch store at plden.company.site. We've got tees, hoodies, beanies, hats, and more, and gear that'll keep you motivated in and out of the gym. Every purchase helps support me and the podcast and keeps the den growing strong. So whether you're hitting a heavy squat session or just lounging in style, we've got you covered. Head to plden.company.site and grab your merch today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Powerlifter's Den. I'm your host, Cam Smith, and today I wanted to bring on a female powerlifter who, although hasn't been competing for that many years, has one of the highest totals in all of women's multiply. Taylor, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Taylor Schaeffer.
All right, so to get started, I love getting a background on kind of where everyone came from how they started into how they got into the platform. So I know for you had a sports background as well as kind of grew up in that farm life. So maybe tell us about how that kind of got you from basically starting out in powerlifting to where you are now.
Yeah, so I played sports, from I could barely walk. I was always active. And then growing up on my family farm too, like just doing chores and whatnot, I developed musculature really early in life, especially for a female. My primary sports were soccer, softball, and volleyball. Dabbled in that throughout high school and whatnot. Started strength training in eighth grade. And then throughout high school, went and played at the collegiate level, played volleyball for 4 years. And then when I was actually a freshman in college, my strength and conditioning coach was like, "Oh, I only know one person that has bigger calves than you. Her name's Laura Phelps." I'm like, who's this lady? Like, there's no way. And then I looked Laura up. So when I was a freshman, I'm like, you're right, her calves are bigger than mine. And so, graduated college, started needing something to do, really kind of lost my identity of like, who am I? What am I doing here? And then I started just training again at a small gym in Sharonville. Met my husband who had been competing in powerlifting for 2 or 3 years and started training with him more consistently. And I was actually like, oh, he's like, you're pretty strong. And then he did my programming from there. And then I just did my first meet in 2020. And that's how I kind of got hooked into the powerlifting realm.
Yeah, so I know a lot of people kind of either find powerlifting just randomly, or a lot of people come from a sports background and a lot of collegiate athletes. So I think everyone gets a different perspective of powerlifting kind of coming into it. So for me, I learned a lot of discipline and regiment through football and things. So what are some of the things that you took from your sports life into powerlifting?
Yeah, in that regard, I would say like the routine and regimen, getting up early, making sure I have doing the things that are a priority, whether I'm nutrition wise, recovering, doing what I need to do in out of the gym, whether it's sports specific or even like training wise, strength and conditioning, or even like injury prevention stuff. Those were big, especially on my rest days, like doing the things that I needed to do so I could be able to perform at that level.
Yeah. And then as far as competing itself too, I know that you kind of stumbled into Laura's world, and now you're kind of looking into trying to beat her total. So what's it been like working with Laura? Obviously, many people have been on the podcast that have been coached by her. She's obviously a very influential person in the sport. So I like to get everyone's kind of perspective of their relationship with her.
Yeah, so when I was with my husband for like the first year, I reached out to Alex Donald, who she and I actually went to college together. She had recently transitioned to training with Laura. I was like, is she like, how is she? Like, she's in Cincinnati area. I'm thinking I'm wanting to take this to the next level. Like, you know, I know you started with her, but how do you feel about her? And Alex was like, she's pretty cool. She's not that scary. And I was like, all right, I'll message her. And her husband was actually Conard in the same meet that I was doing. Um, so I was able to she was there. She helped me, helped me like warm up my jump selection. She just kind of jumped head on into helping me, and which was absolutely awesome. Um, and then it was kind of, history from there. I did start out raw with her. So Alex Donald and I were both primarily her um, individual, like raw individuals at that time. Um, but Laura's great. She's a great coach, remote, let alone having the opportunity to train with her in person is just like a whole new level.
Yeah, and as far as kind of your transition in the gear, was that something you found just generally easier just because of obviously having an athletic background, or is it something that you think would have been more difficult if you didn't have Laura with you?
I think it absolutely would have been significantly more difficult. When I remember the first day I even like went to sweatshop, she's like, "Hey, come out, let's train one day. You can train with Janine Whitaker and Alex Donald." Which, if you're in the powerlifting realm, you're like, "Janine Whitaker? Okay, like I guess I'll go. Hopefully, I don't embarrass myself."
Yeah.
Um, it was a reverse band deadlift with reverse minis, and I remember like I was like, "Oh, I'm here. This is happening." Um, and I was able to hang right with them. At the time, I was competing at 165, um, and it was crazy. And I was able to stick with them. And basically, I think I even potentially outpulled them that day, which was even sillier. And I was like, "Oh, I can hang here. This is good. Accessories were great." And then Laura's like, "Hey, come back like on Wednesday. Like if you want to come like 1 or 2 days a week." Um, we'll see how things go. I can kind of help you with like box squats, your max efforts, stuff like that. And from there, I was kind of taken under the wing by Sarah Buckley and Katie Brandt. Like, hey, you're kind of strong. You want to train with us? In which they were multiply at the time. And so I was doing my raw stuff, and then they were in their multiplies gear and whatnot. And then my next two preps, I was still raw. And then I was like, Laura, I think I'm going to get a pair of boots just to do speed lower, just to kind of help save my hips.
Yep.
I was like, I'm only going to box squat in them. I'm not going to deadlift in them, just solely for box squats. And then, I did one meet like that, a meet prep like that, and it was like kind of history from there. I got my shirt. Um, I got a shirt for the first time, touched 365 to a one board. I was like, oh, this is cool. This is neat.
Yeah, it's something that like basically once you put on your first pair of briefs, it's there's no going back. Like you might still compete
Yes,
raw, but you get bit by that bug. It's like I can say to this day, out of anything in geared lifting, just squatting and briefs and wraps has to be my favorite thing.
I would agree. But my favorite variation, I love a bench shirt. Anything benching, I just love. Like I'm just like this is sick. I like the like going to that dark place and just like hang on tight because you just gotta be super patient. Like the same with briefs and wraps, where it's just kind of lean into the darkness a little bit and just like be extra patient because there's no other rush like it.
Yeah, and I think that's something that why I try to push like even raw people, even if they just want to stay competing raw, to like kind of get into the things, and you learn a lot about yourself, how much you can kind of handle, and
Hmm.
obviously the stimulus you get from the overload is going to translate back to raw. Because a prime example is my raw bench went up like 50 pounds just from one
Yes.
training cycle in the gear.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then as far as competing in the gear, when was your first multiply meet?
It was in, I believe, 2003. I did north of border, so I didn't travel for that one. Um, that was my first one. I think I weighed in like 170 pounds. Um, like it was fun. I was like, my only goal going in that meet was just not to bum out.
Yep, that should be
Like
everyone's first goal in a
like that was
multi.
just it was literally to only get a total. That was it. We did have like no numbers in mind. We're just gonna kind of see baseline, kind of where we're at, and just to get a total. Um, I think I was really set up for success in that realm where we didn't rush too much too fast. Um, it wasn't so much like a strength issue as it was like learning the gear, learning how to use the gear, and really being comfortable in the gear.
Yeah, and I think this kind of segues into the being caught up in numbers talk that you
Mhm.
mentioned in your questionnaire. It's kind of something that if you could almost go into a meet with a beginner's mindset of like, I'm just here to get a total, I'm just going to do the lifts instead of kind of worrying about what kind of adjustments you have to make to hit these certain
Mhm.
numbers and stuff. Like you take away so much pressure on yourself. That's why when if like I had the same goal my first meet and it went very well. So I think
Mhm.
trying to get that mindset of not necessarily chasing the numbers or being like, okay, maybe you're 1 meet away from this goal number. So,
Because right, it's a slippery slope. And I know, especially training of kind of like pushing the envelope. I learned, especially probably within the last year, like things I'm getting pretty close to some numbers. And it's like I'm like let's see what I got today. Like I feel good, everything's moving good. Um, and I'm like, can I do one more? She's like, yeah. I'm like, okay. But then sometimes she's like, no. She's like, save it. It's so early. But it's kind of learning when to push and when to kind of hold back a little bit. It's a give and take. Like it's early on a prep, I'm going to save a jump, or sometimes I can be more aggressive early on, and then I'll save a jump or two towards the end of prep. So I'm just like I either need to smoke it, or if I make it harder than need be, it's gonna take longer for me to recover, and then everything else is gonna suffer.
Yeah, then when it kind of like comes to meet day, like I would say in general, I'm way less of a head case than I used to be. But in terms of like all the numbers and all like the math and like what do I need to do on this bench if I miss this
Mhm.
squat and like getting all wrapped up in that, it's like putting extra stress on yourself when you don't need
Yeah,
to do that, especially if you have a coach that you're literally paying to do that.
yeah. I know. The biggest thing for Laura, she just wants us to have a good day. Whether we have numbers in mind, like this is fun. We get to do this. Like in the end of the day, like this is supposed to be fun. Is a big thing that she kind of reiterates.
Yeah, and then as far as like kind of the mindset on meet day, obviously everyone has their own rituals, their own things like that. But something that you notice among the professionals is they're a lot more calm, cool, and collected. They're
Mhm.
hanging out, they're having fun in warm ups. They're not necessarily like headphones on, super serious. So I think being able to like kind of turn it on when it's time to go to the platform is something that you learn along the way. So as far as your meet day, what are some of the things that you do to kind of stay focused?
So I know. Even pre-meet, I like the night prior. My last meal is always a fillet, yellow potatoes, and asparagus.
Yeah.
Every single time. It doesn't matter if we're traveling. We kind of make it happen. It's at least some type of red meat, potatoes, and a vegetable. Like that's every single time. And then we end the night with ice cream. That's just kind of what I do. Meat day, I always shower the morning of. I'm kind of crazy in the realm of even if I'm in the last fight, I'm gonna be one of the first people up the video. I just I just need to go. I need to settle in, just kind of mosey around. And then I'm in between attempts. My husband, it would make him so mad in between attempts. I would actually be yawning in between attempts. He's like, "Are you gonna wake up?" I'm like, "I'm all right. I'm okay."
Yeah.
I'm like, "I'm just hanging out."
Yeah.
So it's funny in that realm that I'm able to just kind of like shut it off, and completely. I just try to relax and kind of just chill out in between.
Yeah, and I think that's something that in terms of like I guess like the science behind it is like when you kind of get raise your heart rate to go out for an attempt, like
Hmm.
after that attempt you want to bring it right back down. You want to kind
Yeah.
of reset, like each attempt is its own thing. You don't want to like build up your heart rate, build up your tension, build up your stress for each attempt,
Hmm.
because by the time you get to deadlifts, half the time we don't want to even be there anyways because we're exhausted. So if you just
Yeah.
compound that, you're gonna miss your second, your
Hmm.
third, even your opener.
Yeah. I know, like I can kind of tell, especially, the first squat is like it's the most nerve-wracking thing.
Hmm.
Like I'm just like once you get the first squat in, you're like, oh, I can breathe. We're good. Like it's gonna be a good day. And I know after the first squat, if I'm still pretty antsy and kind of flighty, I'm like, oof, I'm gonna have to really, really like try to downregulate myself actively. Um, and it's just kind of like learning that and practicing that even like in the meet prior to the meet day.
Yeah, and that's one of the quirks with multiply. Like for raw, if your opener moves slow, like you're kind of fucked for the day for the most
Hmm.
part. But if your opener and multiply moves slow, like it could straight up just be from all the nerves. You change your technique just a little bit, and then
Yeah,
you get it, and you're
yeah,
like, all right, time to reset, and then you smoke your second.
yep. I think that's what early on, I heard someone say like multiply is what you can do raw. I think once you put multiply, it's like a magnifying glass.
Yeah,
Like every little imbalance that you have or weakness, it's going to be magnified intensely. And even if it's like you set up like your foot angle is off by a half an inch, it's going to kind of make and break, whether your pick's good or not. If you're able to sit back and actually hinge and load the gear, like something that small, um, can make or break a lift.
yeah, and that's why like one of the biggest things for multiply in general, single ply, any sort of equipped lifting is the best way to get better at it is time. So for you to
Hmm.
have such a high total, only being in it for a few years, what are some of the maybe the current struggles you have with the gear, or some of the things that you need to improve upon?
I know for myself, like I said, I was really fortunate. Like I started off and like especially like deadlifts was probably the hardest transition for me. Um, because solely because of the straps. I could pull raw. I mean, I was a strong raw deadlifter. I pulled. I pulled 515, like low fives, raw. So, you don't get a ton out of your deadlift suit.
Yeah.
So, we didn't really know what to expect. We just kind of winging it. But the straps are like, they still give you the most kind of struggle of like, am I pulling my chest through too soon, or I'm not pulling my chest through enough? Is like the timing of everything, because it's like you got to shoot for the bar, but you're like, ooh, my hands in the right spot. Guess it's too late. Guess we're gonna have to figure it out. Um, it's a trial and error, but it's like once you shoot, like you gotta go.
Yeah, and for me, that's something that this prep, like my deadlift has gone through the roof. And because one day I was training, I was lifting, I had the straps, and I wasn't usually using the straps that tight. Same with squat, and then Skibo, he's like, "All right, we're cranking the straps now." So it happened, and then I was going to deadlift. I was like, "I'm getting to the bar so easily. Why aren't I tightening the straps?" As soon as
Hmm.
I started tightening them, I was like, "All right, I can still get to the bar relatively easy, but now the weight's way easier to pull." So that
Yep.
obviously helped with getting stronger and stuff. But I went from pulling raw conventional to sumo, and I wasn't really using the gear. I was basically just learning sumo. So when I went
Hmm.
back to raw, I really figured out the sumo pull itself.
Yeah.
And now that I'm in gear, I'm actually learning to use the gear itself. And
Hmm.
it's kind of exciting to see like where my deadlift's going to be in the next year or so.
Yeah. That's like the exciting part. I know. I think the most challenging for me too was going from like getting stronger, being okay with like growing into a weight class where my leverage has changed.
Yeah.
And then so like my squat's feeling so good, my bench is feeling awesome, my deadlift feels like crap. I'm like, I can't get in position with shit. Just like figuring that out and figuring out my new leverages a little bit. That has primarily been my biggest, I would say, my one of my biggest struggles.
Yeah, and that's something that I'm trying to fill out 275. I'm like 257 right now, so obviously I got plenty of room to grow. And
Yeah.
I'm hoping it doesn't take a hit on my deadlift. I think I might be able to get away with it just because of how long my legs are.
Hmm.
But I'm just really hoping I can get some better leverages on bench because I got long ass
You got long
arms.
arms.
Yeah, dude, it's not good.
It's I know. Have you ever measured your like arm span? Like
Y-
your
yeah, it's like I think it's like 6'5" or 6'4",
how tall are you?
6'2".
6'2". Yeah. By my hands, I'm 5'7", but I'm only 5'2". And I know I don't look like they don't, my arms don't look that long,
Yeah.
which is kind of crazy, but it's weird. It's so weird how it works out.
Yeah. So obviously, you just competed at the women's pro am. Obviously, we've had several people on about that, and it's still to this day one of my favorite meets in powerlifting for a multitude of reasons.
Yeah.
I know you've done it a couple times, so the times you've done it, maybe your first time, your first experience with it, and then kind of like the future of it. How what have been some of your favorite moments in it?
Um, I started, I'm trying to think when my first 2021 was my first women's pro-am. I was still doing it raw. It was, I mean, it was wild. It was wild to see. I've never been exposed to really multiply before, but seeing how everyone supported each other and the people from amateur day came to pro day and just how everyone supported everyone. And it was like just awesome to be under the same roof. And to see that kind of have grow over the past couple of years, it's even cooler like the setup. Like Laura has like does an unreal job.
Yeah.
um she puts her heart and soul into the women's pro am, like all the hard work and the background stuff like that no one even knows about. Like like it's truly amazing and one of a kind. And if you've ever been to a women's pro am, like it's magical. Like magical things happen at the women's pro am just because of the atmosphere itself.
Yeah, and I think I went last year and I went this year, and I think my favorite moment, even though it was three misses, I think my favorite part of the whole meet was you, Alex, and Deanna's third pull attempts because
That was
they were like perfect attempts, and they were all so close, and it was just insane
yeah,
to watch.
yeah, that was it was similar this year too. Between last year and this year. I think it was us three, the last also, and I think they were still for like all-time world records, and we're all above 600 pounds. Like we're right on, especially Alex as the raw lifter, she's around the cusp of that 600.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I think Laura in the next like year or so is going to have a handful of women that are pulling over six. Like it was 500 was a crazy number before, like 600 is like the new norm.
Yeah, it's crazy just how much the totem pole shifts in the sport as a whole, but especially in women's now because it's getting so much more traction. It's bringing a lot more women to the sport that have these great genetics and have these great drives and work ethics that wouldn't know about the sport without people like you.
Mhm. Which is even crazy to even think about. Like, I just, I put a lot of pressure on myself. Like, that I have to remind myself, like, we're just having fun. But I think I was even showing Jordan. She just posted like the women's like top five total and whatnot, and I showed my husband the other day. Like, look at these names. Like, look. I was like, to think like my name is kind of even in the list of the top 10 of the realm of these women that have been competing the past 20 years, and they like their numbers still stand. It's mind blowing.
Yeah.
It really is. It's crazy to think about of where they were 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, and where it's going to be the next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah, and as far as like the top five and top tens of like different weight classes, or even just all time, you talk to these people, and I feel like almost everyone in this top 10% has such an like an imposter syndrome of like they look around and like, whoa, I'm in the same area as this person, and they say the same thing about the other person. So it's just
Yeah.
fun to see people's perspective from that
Mhm.
top five.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's even reflecting after the women's crayon too. Like not the day I wanted, but it sometimes that's the way the cards fall, and that's okay. But like still say like looking back, I'm like I was being absolutely ridiculous. Like Taylor, you had a bad day, and still you still totaled like top three in your weight class all time, and like silly stuff like that. Like that's you're being ridiculous.
Yeah, and as far as like the judging and stuff goes, like obviously at a pro level meet like that, it's strict, but and obviously people have complaints and stuff, but we're not going to get into that because I don't even like bothering to talk about it because I think if you're a professional, you just have to make the
Yeah.
adjustments,
Yep.
and people that kind of sit around and complain about maybe calls that were questionable or honestly right and they just don't want to admit it. I think that's
Mhm.
something that it's kind of a separator for between like a professional and a rookie,
Yeah.
even if they have a professional total.
I would agree. It's really kind of like establishing that standard. You hold yourself to that standard. If you are holding yourself to that standard, it really should be no doubt. Um, and I think that's where we're lucky too, where we have Laura because she's she's rough on us, man. She has no problem bearing us.
Yeah.
And she'll be the first to tell you. She's like, I'm like, I was there. She's like, no. I'm like, okay. But that's where we're also really lucky and fortunate too.
Yeah, and I think that's why I think when you have training crews that hold each other accountable in that aspect, when it comes to meet day, and maybe you guys were training to like at depth, and then at the meet it has to be a little bit lower, but you've been
Mhm.
training to that strictness for a while that you can make the adjustments and not let
Mhm.
it completely ruin your day.
Yeah, absolutely. And be able to make that transition, like, okay, you went 1 to 3 on squats, but guess what? You still have the bench
Yeah.
and you still have the deadlift. Like, regardless, you're still in the meet. You still have to put a total together.
Yeah, and like for squats example, I just pick an arbitrary number. Say your goal was 1,000 for the day, but you have to bury it. Like, okay, just get in the mindset right away. Like, all right,
Hmm.
maybe only 960 is going to be there today, and just
Yep.
adjust from there. Make the adjustment, and still try to put together either a PR total or win the meet if there's money and things like
Yep.
that. There's so many different variables that you have to consider that you can't have your perfect day.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like, where it kind of came down, I think for me at the program too, like, got my opener, missed my second, and I was like, okay, let's just fucking send it. Let's just see. And we're like, we'll go for it. We'll go for it. And still missed it. But I'm like, I took a chance. Like I was like, I wanted to see, like I wanted to know, like even as a confidence. I'm like, I didn't get buried by it. It didn't fold me. I just have to be more confident and more patient. Like I think that does a lot also of taking those chances, but you have to be okay with taking those chances at the end of the day also.
Yeah, I totally agree. If you like, especially multiply, like no one goes 9 for 9 in a multiply meet. Even if you are sandbagging all your lifts, like
Hmm.
there's something gonna go wrong at least one of the lifts. It's almost a
Yeah.
guarantee.
Which I can't say much. This is the first time I've gone less than 8 for 9 in a meet.
What do you?
I don't know if we've just go ahead.
What's the missed attempt usually?
Um, this is the first time I've missed a squat. And I missed two. At WPO, I missed a bench for my butt coming up,
Ah,
and then and on my opener. And I was like, we're gonna go up anyway,
Yeah, I think
you know. And
the
then I
whole
deadlift.
yeah. As far as like the whole discussion of like if someone misses an opener, whether to go up or not, I always find that something very funny and is very coach dependent because I'm in the mindset of like depending on what you missed it on, if it's like obviously if you get buried by it, like take it again. But if it's like you missed on depth and you still smoked it, or you got some stupid red light for something, like I'm in the mindset of just always go to your next attempt. Like at that point, you got to get in the meat, and if it's not something that is due to you being weak that day, then why not send it?
I think it does come to the level of the athlete though. Like if you've a beginner, like you know, and we're just trying to get a total, like retake your opener. Like retake your opener. If you miss, if it's technical, even learning, like even if it's within your first year of multiply, I think it's still going to be important. Take the opener. Don't make the silly jump. Um, just get more confident with that weight, and then you can be more aggressive than your second if you want, but you got to do it right. And that's the biggest thing I think. Even making the decision from missing my second squat, like you know, Sarah Buckley looked at me. She's like, "We gonna what do we do? What are we gonna do in the gym?" She's like, "You're gonna if you do it right, you're gonna get it." She's like, "But what would we retake it in the gym? Like, what are we doing here?" I'm like, "All right, it's fine. We'll take it. Get your head out of your ass, Taylor. Like, we'll just do it right."
Yeah, and that's
But I think it comes with maturity of a lifter also.
Yeah, and that's another thing with multiply too is um when it's raw, you can just retake it and or you can
Hmm.
kind of open way lighter than you really need to kind of get yourself
Yeah,
in the meat. But when it's multiply, like if you go too light, then you can't get to depth, you can't touch. Like it's
yeah.
such a you have such a smaller window.
You're right in that gray area almost of like, okay, I know my bench. This is the lightest I can touch. But then it's like, oof, can I hit depth with my squat? I don't like, you know, it's a gamble.
Yeah, and that's with one of the things with time in the gear too. Like obviously a prime example is a shirt. Like if you can't touch, obviously you're not getting a press. So and some people their window of what they can touch to what they can press is a lot shorter than some people who've been doing it for years that can bench 700 but can
Hmm.
touch with like 315. Like obviously the shirt's tight and whatever, different variables like that, but and you can set the shirt and stuff, but that window is something that you need to be able to adjust to because if you can only touch 485 and your max is 550, like if you're having a bad day, you're fucked.
Hmm. Yeah, there's not a lot of wiggle room for you. That's for sure.
Yeah, and obviously I know you train conjugate, and that's something that um, I think is one of the best methods to use. I'm a big conjugate fan. Everyone
Hmm.
in multiply who's pretty much in that upper echelon pretty much trains that in some sort of fashion. So, for you, when was your first experience of conjugate?
It was actually in college. My strength and conditioning coach, she actually helped Laura teach seminars, specifically like the conjugate side with CrossFit. Christina Webb, she, you know, I learned how to box squat and used AR when I was a freshman in college. So I had 4 years of experience of it. Was great. You know, we did box jumps on our speed lowers days. I could jump out of the roof. Like I was just a super explosive athlete by nature, and I just even got even more explosive from it. Um, so that was kind of my first realm of conjugates. I still really didn't know what it was until probably my junior year of college of like, you know, what conjugate actually was, like the verbiage of it,
Yeah.
until, you know, my exercise science classes and whatnot. And I was able to like learn and deep dive more into it.
Yeah, and as far as the explosiveness goes, I think that's something that if you are an explosive athlete and then you kind of transition into multiply and you have to really learn that slowing things down and that patience
Hmm.
and you see like as you gain more experience in it, like people like Chris Delafav and Rupo and stuff, where they're very explosive athletes, but they're so good in the gear now that they can still be explosive. But someone like
Yeah.
me, who's only been doing it for a little bit, I have to be more patient out of the hole. I have to be more patient with the touch, and
Hmm.
it's something that kind of annoys me to be honest because I'd like to use my explosiveness, but
Yeah.
obviously in the future I'd like to get to that level to where I can kind of bring that back.
Yeah. I think that's one of my biggest things is like, they're like, make it move fast. And I'm like, making it move fast for Taylor, I get out of control.
Yeah.
Smooth is fast for Taylor. Like if I can stay patient, stay and make it smooth, it's gonna be really pretty. When I start to get try to like, oh, I just gotta move it fast, like that's when things like uncontrollable variables come out, and I'm like, what? I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I think when I really simplify and just keeping things smooth, things normally go they go a lot better. They go in my favor.
Yeah, and once again, back to the bench shirt. That's one thing. Like if you go too fast, you blast off your chest, you lose all your tricep in your shirt, and the next thing you know, you're
Yeah.
just sitting there 3 inches from lockout,
And
struggling.
you're just like you got nothing.
Exactly.
Like you have nowhere to go.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that once you can adjust to, and something that I'm not looking forward to figuring out over the next few years. But um, like I said before, it's something that takes time.
Hmm.
And so I know you're hopping in a meet in the next few weeks as well. Obviously, it's kind of a quick turnaround. So for you, what are some of the goals kind of going into this meet?
Um, this me, I'm planning on just going like a true 181. I will. I don't know. I'm just gonna have fun. I'm really not putting any expectation on myself. Of course, in the back of my mind, I do have some numbers. Um, but that is kind of it is what it is. I'm just gonna go have fun, try to put a day together, put a good day together. Ultimately, I would like to, maybe press the seal a little bit on some 181 records. But you honestly never know till meet day.
Yeah,
You really genuinely don't know till meet day. You got the most perfect prep, and then meet day it just crumbles.
yeah, or the
And like
complete opposite.
yeah, or you could have an absolute awful meat prep, and your things are just like you're like, wow, wow, and that's how it normally has been for me. I've yet to have a phenomenal meat prep, but sometimes that's just the way it works out.
Yeah, and I'm kind of in that same boat. I wouldn't say I necessarily had a bad prep, but I think it kind of depends on. It's very athlete dependent too. Like generally speaking, I'm someone that performs better like a game day scenario than a practice
Hmm.
scenario. Obviously, a training session practice. So um,
Definitely a gamer. I am definitely a gamer.
yeah, and I think that comes down to obviously how you recover and stuff during a deload, but
Hmm.
it comes down to the mindset of the person. That's kind of what we were talking about before about not being taking yourself too seriously, not focusing on too much of the day. Like take the day you have.
Hmm. And it's I know it's significantly easier said than it's done.
Yeah,
Like I really need to practice what I preach. Um, I know there's sometimes that like Laura and my husband might can shake me, but I'm just like at the end of the day, this is fun. It's fun. It's a hobby. Like this we got to do something really cool.
yeah. Besides competing, what are some of your other involvements in powerlifting? Whether it's coaching, spotting, and loading, judging, anything like that.
Normally I'll kind of help with North Border, like behind the scenes and stuff like that. Just wherever they're needed, like spotted and loading. And then I help with one of my training partners, Zach Privet. He and I coach a Special Olympics for like Hamilton County, or I guess it's Butler County. But we have a team of about 8 athletes that we practice once a week, and then about once, sometimes twice a month, we travel and do powerlifting meets with them. It's a push pull only, but I mean it's a ton of fun.
Why is there no squat?
I actually don't know why there isn't. I think it's more so for like risk of injury and whatnot. There are meets that some of them do that are sanctioned. They'll do all three lifts, but primarily the Special Olympics is just a push, press, bench, and deadlift.
Yeah, so I'm sure working with these athletes, obviously, you kind of get a different perspective of
Hmm.
powerlifting. So maybe tell us about some of your experiences, kind of working with that, and kind of maybe some of the things that you learned that you'd like to see more in our powerlifting culture.
I think the amount of support that they have for each other is unreal. They can walk in a room and they make friends automatically, no matter what their differences is and whatnot. But the amount of support and yelling and cheering they have for one each other. If they miss a lift, like there's like at least five people on them, like saying you did a good job, you'll get it next time. Like it's kind of surreal. And they're absolutely like the athletes are so funny. They're so funny. Um, and like I think there's an athlete like last week at practice. Um, he he pulled like 335 and it was a grinder. And he's like, that was easy. And I'm like, we're gonna be done for the day.
Yeah.
He's like, I think I have one more. I'm like, we don't. We're gonna move on.
Yeah, and I think, like you said, obviously the support you kind of have from that group is awesome. It's something that I think has gotten better in powerlifting, at least in my time. Even just the few
Hmm.
years I've been here, I've seen obviously there's so many nice people and so many great people in the sport, and there's a few bad apples here and there, obviously, but generally speaking, I think one of the best parts of powerlifting is the community behind it, and
Mhm.
everyone can tell you they've made a friend in powerlifting. They've made, whether it's on the internet or at a meet or their training partners, like there's so much more to it.
Yeah, and I think that one of the biggest takeaways also, besides the community aspect, is the mentality that they come in with an open mind. Yeah, they're going to be nervous, but having the ability, like, oh, I can do this. Like, I can do way more than I thought I've been able to do. Half the time, they'll ask what's on the bar. I'm like, I'll tell you after.
Yeah.
Like, because if they get stuck on a number, like they're like they make it harder. And I'm like, you have no idea. Like, do you know how much that was? Like, it was 285. And he's like, excuse me. Like it's fun. It's a little game you get to play with them. Like you're like we're gonna go up, but then sometimes like it's so interesting in having the interaction between them. But especially from a mentality standpoint, like them being able to do more than they think they're able to do.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of something we could talk a little bit about too. I like to do that sometimes where I'm like, hey, just put the weight on the bar. I don't care what it is. Tell me after, especially when it's like one of those, like a Circa Max or something, when it's like, you
Hmm.
don't know what the AR is. Like, you don't get caught up in what you're picking. Just keep loading weight, figure it out after, be
Yep.
happy or be disappointed. But either way, like,
Hmm.
when you kind of don't care about what you're lifting, you're just going to execute how you need to execute.
Yeah.
And then you're going to perform way better than if, oh, all right, this is 1,000, this is really heavy. And then you get in your head and then you do something wrong.
Yeah. It's like just you just gotta pick it up. That's what my husband says. He's like, stop thinking about it. You just gotta pick it up, Taylor. And I'm like, all right, fine.
Yeah. It,
Um,
one of my favorite stories from that, something that I like to do sometimes too, is like, if we're training, say someone's going for a max, while they're not looking, I'll throw like a 2.5 on each end and stuff, and be like, hey, guess what? I added some weight, and they're like, oh, I didn't even notice. And it's like, your mind is one of your biggest limiters.
mhm. Absolutely. I know because sometimes you're chasing those numbers, a certain numbers like or variations. You're like, okay, this is a good tell to kind of see where I'm at to project, especially like early on in meet prep or right before meet prep starts. You're like, this is kind of where we should be at in the ballpark. But then it's also learning like sometimes like you just don't go in with a number. You just have to. That's what I have today, and you move on. I think that was one of the biggest learning lessons this past year. Laura kind of engraved with me. She's like, you do your max for what effort you have that day, and you live and for another day. You just hit your accessories super hard because the max variation is just a very minute aspect. You're just trying to get the stimulus and get out.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really like about conjugate is you're changing variation so much, and that even something as small as if it's 10 degrees colder in the gym, the bands are going to be tighter that day. Like, it's something that
Hmm.
you can obviously go for like a 5 pound PR the last time you did it and things like that, but the variables are always different. So
Yep,
you don't need to worry about a gym lift. Like, worry about what you're going to hit on the platform.
yep, yep. And that's what's interesting too. I think is just like taking that. If you can take that 5 pound PR, be done. Like move on. You got the stimulus, just move on. There's sometimes you want to get greedy, and if the time's right, the environment's there, the people are there. Like sometimes, like nah, we're gonna jump 30 pounds again. We'll see what we'll find out, and like that's what makes it fun, especially with a crew. Especially you have like one or two people kind of going back and forth.
Yeah, and that's one of the things with like the max effort days with the crew. It's more of like a competition aspect than anything. You're just trying to
Hmm.
have fun. You're trying to beat yourself, but the real work is the boring shit, the accessories, the recovery,
Yeah,
the sleep, the hydration, all that shit that, quite frankly, no one really wants to do, but that's
hmm,
what it takes.
yep, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, like, obviously it would be nice if we could just walk into the gym, hit a max effort squat, and go home and add 50 pounds to our squat, but that's just not how it
Where's
is.
the fun in that? It's interesting because like I of course always love doing the max effort variations, but also love a good pump. We just love a good pump. Just nice and full. There's nothing better than like a nice and full triceps. A tricep pump is just sick.
Yeah.
Um, like who doesn't want jacked arms?
Yeah, and that's that's another thing with some of the powerlifting culture. It's like they care, just obviously we care about our totals and our numbers, but
Hmm.
I mean, most of us started this to get big, to look jacked, and like have fun,
Hmm.
and like you said, get a good pump. So when there's some people out there that just they'll come in, they'll do 3 sets of squats and 3 sets of bench and no accessories and then go home. Like, where's the fun in that? Like, what are you doing? Like, go get a pump,
Yeah,
look jacked.
yeah, exactly. Like also the fun part.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite things that Kevin Oak said, he's like, I don't care about being the 150-pound world champion if I don't look jacked.
No, especially I think that's the big aspect now that we're starting to transition is the athletes that are also in better shape,
Yeah.
they're performing at a whole nother level, which is really, I think, starting to come to light. I know, like Jenna Ordenza, she's really big into conditioning. Sarah Buckley and I, like, and Laura, we started doing this like certain bike conditioning from a fellow out in California. Like, it really takes it up a notch. It really does. Recovery wise, you're able to down regulate yourself. Like, it's a completely new level unlocked.
Yeah, and it takes a step up from just GPP. It's so much more than
Hmm.
that. Like, you look at some of the top people in the sport right now, and they actually look healthy. They look strong.
Yeah,
They have abs. You look at someone like Phil Herndon, for example. Like, that man's a monster, and he's
he's a
not a
big man.
yeah, and he's not a 400-pound piece of shit that's like struggling to breathe after squats. Like,
Yeah.
it has so much more performance. Like, cardio is not bad for a powerlifter.
No, absolutely not. And if you're not, I mean, if you're not doing some type of conditioning, like you're kind of doing yourself harm, especially like you got to be able to deadlift.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize is like you still, yeah, it's only 9 lifts, but it's gonna tell. It's gonna tell at the end of the day.
Yeah, and that's kind of the difference maker too. Obviously, you have like the deadlift specialist that'll come in at the end of the meet and blow someone out of the water after their
Yeah.
subtotal was 300 pounds less. But like, come down to two, like, say you have two equally strong people,
Hmm.
the meet comes down to conditioning at that point.
Hmm. Yeah. And that's like, like why wouldn't you want that extra? Especially if you could get like the extra like 1 to 2%, like from a conditioning standpoint to be able to translate that into strength. Like that's a make or break, like if you're gonna get that last lift or not.
Yeah, and especially at these pro meets and stuff, that it comes to a point where people are fighting for that 1%, that 2% boost,
Hmm.
and they often overlook something as simple as just being in shape.
Hmm. And there's some people that aren't even willing to commit to even grow. If they even started doing it, like substantially, it would increase by an even larger percent. But it's just taking the responsibility and I think and the opportunity to grow in that aspect.
Yeah, and then I guess kind of on the flip side, not necessarily obviously keep your conditioning, your health up, but as far as kind of like the idea of like growing into your weight class, like something like me, for example, where I was at 242, and there was a little point where I was kind of teetering that line of starting to
Hmm.
cut, but I'm still a young athlete, and I wanted to grow into my total. I wanted
Yeah,
to grow into my frame, and if I was stubborn and stuck at that 242, who knows like how much I'd be suffering right now from it.
yeah, absolutely. Um, I'm kind of, I and we prep and like in prep and off season, like I fluctuate quite a bit because I do compete between 165 and 181. I'll do one big cut a year. I try to only do one big cut a year, and then I'll go to 181. But I mean, I walk around mid to high 180s, especially like deep in meat prep. Um, like, do I love it? No, but that's where I feel the strongest. And but I know I make that sacrifice. Like the cut's gonna be harder later in prep.
Yeah, and I think the difference is too is, um, like you said, you train in the off season at a heavier weight, and when
Mhm.
your body adjusts to that, your strength goes through the roof. So when you go to a cut, you're still going to be stronger than you were if you were to just maintain your weight and not
Yes.
make a big cut.
Yeah, and I think like, also going back to the conditioning standpoint, if you're in better shape, the cut and recomp is easier.
Yeah.
You're able to just recomp it better.
And it is interesting to see different people cut at different weight classes too, because you have some people that are like 320 trying to cut to 308 and they're struggling. Meanwhile, you
Yeah.
have some people that are 180, 185 cutting to 165 and have no issues.
And I have been blessed. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm kind of crazy for the cuts that I've done. My biggest one was one from 193 to 165.
Oh wow.
That was last pro am. I tried to do it again this year and I wasn't able to get quite those last 4 pounds off. But sometimes it just rolls that way. But it is kind of crazy. There are some freaks out there that can do it. But there are people that can cut 8 pounds and they just can't recomp from it too.
Yeah. And so for you, what is kind of like your window of like pounds being able to cut before you start seeing a hit in your performance?
Normally, I mean, I've been able to get away with about 22 pounds. Anything over 22 to 23, I think it starts to get a little sketchy for me. But I mean, that's still like a 13% weight cut,
Yeah,
which is pretty abnormal.
for sure.
But even like this past meet, I wouldn't say like I'm not sure I could say, you know, because I wasn't able to make the 165, but strength was there. It would just didn't what the cars didn't fall. Um, but you know, it sometimes it is what it is.
Yeah. So I guess kind of before we wrap things up here, as far as like the world of powerlifting, what are some of the things that um, maybe you'd like to see change, or some of the issues you have with the current state of the sport?
I honestly like, you know, I don't really pay attention to the noise. I'm just there to compete,
Yeah.
to be honest. That's really I'm just there to have fun, put a total together. Um, that's impress the envelope a little bit. I kind of really don't care about the outside noise. Um, it's just that's not really my realm, to be honest. I really couldn't tell you what was going on, not going on, because it doesn't affect me. I don't like, you know, out of sight, out of mind. I just kind of stay in my own lane and
Yeah.
just train.
Yeah. And I think that's honestly, I wish that's something I could do. I think doing something like this podcast is where it becomes a blessing and curse, because you learn so
Mhm.
much about the world of powerlifting to
Yeah,
when you get to see someone that's like, hey, I'm just here to compete. I'm here to have fun with my friends. Like
yeah,
it's such a breath of fresh air.
yeah. It's really unique, I would say.
Yeah. So I think we can kind of wrap things up here. So I'll ask you my final question. If you could give a new powerlifter or someone going into their first meet a word of advice, what would you say?
Biggest thing is just be patient and have fun. You know, things don't happen overnight, but just keep showing up is the biggest thing.
Yep. I think yeah, you got to play the long game in the sport. This is not a sport where you're only in it for, well, some people are only in it for a few years, but I think the people that are
Yeah,
patient and take their time with it instead of blowing their load too early are the ones that rise to the top.
absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on. It was my pleasure.
Yeah, thanks for having me.